In recent weeks, Piers Morgan has used his show to give a platform to a huge range of voices on the war on Gaza. It hasn't always made for comfortable viewing, but it's never been dull. And now Owen Jones has appeared on the show. Now, it began with this exchange about what's currently happening at Al-Shifa Hospital.
Babies right now are gasping for breath and suffocating. We've had several nurses and patients shot dead. In fact, this whole hospital has been described by medical staff as a mortuary.
But you don't know.
Just quickly, when a hospital becomes a mass grave, when dozens of decomposing bodies have to be buried in a mass grave in a hospital, we're talking, what you said, can I just quote something you said about Putin? And I think this was very wise. You said, in March 2022, I'm seeing a genocidal monster killing women and babies in maternity hospitals as we sit back and let him do it. Why was it so disgraceful? But you were right. You were right to be emotional.
Here's the difference.
Why when you see this hospital, is there not the same fury?
Let me explain. Because the two are, in my opinion, morally very different. In one case, Vladimir Putin's illegal invasion of Ukraine, he was committing war crimes, having illegally invaded wait a second, let me finish. Having invaded a sovereign democratic country. Here, it was Israel that was invaded by a vast number of terrorists who murdered over 1,500 innocent men, women, children. They kidnapped 240 people, including babies, children, Holocaust survivors. So my point is, morally, there is a massive difference.
Hold on.
Morally, it's a massive difference. Now, the question of the hospital, wait a sec. The question of the hospitals is this to me. They have so far produced some evidence of Hamas operating inside the hospital. For me, so far, as a journalist trying to be fair and impartial, I don't think, as you've heard me say to Mark Regev, I don't think I've seen enough evidence here, which says to me this was a sprawling Hamas command center. But there is a moral difference between what Putin's doing in Ukraine and what Israel's doing to defend itself against Hamas, isn't there?
Hold on.
Isn't there?
No, no, sorry, this is the difference, okay, if you want to talk about that or trying to separate them. For a Ukrainian ordinary civilian being killed or for an ordinary Palestinian child being killed,
both equally awful.
None of them did anything wrong. No. We agree on that, don't we?
Yes, we do.
We absolutely agree on that.
Yes, we do.
Now, when you repeatedly denounced Putin for his genocidal behaviour in Ukraine, do you stand by that? Do you think that's a genocide?
Absolutely.
Well, it doesn't matter what the basis for what the operation...
Of course it does.
No,
it does.
So I think there are two interesting issues playing out there. So one is the point Owen is making, which is that killing civilians is killing civilians and war crimes are war crimes, right? Whoever does it and for whatever reason. So if Morgan thinks that Russia were committing a genocide, then he would have to say the same about Israel. Their actions are very similar. Of course, if Piers Morgan were being consistent. On the other hand, Piers Morgan is saying that the reason for the bombing of civilians does matter. If you were bombing civilians in self-defense, that's fine, or at least it's not genocide, as he said Putin was committing. Now, Owen is saying correctly, genocidal actions don't stop being genocidal just because they were quote-unquote provoked, right? It doesn't matter what led you to take those actions. If the actions are genocidal, it's a genocide, right? Again, I normally defer to sort of scholars of genocide when it comes to this issue. We're talking here about consistency. There's another big difference here, though, between the Russia and Israel examples, which I think is very relevant here. Now, Russia illegally invaded Ukraine. It was very clearly a war of aggression, and they went on to kill a lot of civilians. Now, Russia said it was a war of self-defense, but it wasn't, right? That was not a war of self-defense, and Piers Morgan rightly called it out. Now, he called it genocide. We can agree or disagree if that's the case, but we're talking about consistency here. Now, Israel also says their bombardment is self-defense, and as Piers Morgan is pointing out, that is more plausible potentially on the face of it. Hamas did commit a terrible attack on Israeli citizens, and the argument goes invading Gaza to wipe out Hamas was the only reasonable response. But that's where the argument falls down, and it falls down for this reason. Israel can't declare a war of self-defense against Gaza because Gaza isn't an independent country, right? It's been occupied by Israel for 56 years, and you can't declare a war on a country you are occupying, right? Very important for us to keep that in mind. Everyone keeps acting as if sort of there are these two independent states and one state has attacked the other, and so the other has the right to sort of fight back. Gaza isn't a country, right? Gaza is a territory which has been under Israeli occupation for 56 years. Now, you'll see some sort of Twitter trolls telling you, oh no, they withdrew from Gaza in 2005. Now, on one sense, that is true, right? They withdrew settlers and they withdrew the military from Gaza. Obviously, at the same time, they were massively expanding their settlements in the West Bank, which Israel thinks is more valuable. But under international law, and as the UN recognizes, they still occupy Gaza because they control what goes in it and what comes out of it. They control the airspace. Gaza is not in any way independent, which means you can't declare war against it because it's not a state. All right, anyway, let's go back to the debate.
What Israel's doing is not genocide.
There's a difference between what Israel, you could say both Israel and Hamas have engaged in genocidal and murderous rhetoric.
No.
And I'll give you an example.
No,
yes, they have.
No, you can't.
Benjamin Netanyahu.
No,
I can. Is it uncensored or not?
Yes. You can say
Let me quote what the Israeli authorities have said.
Go on.
Benjamin Netanyahu, when he quoted Amalek, the scriptures, what does Amalek say? He quotes Amalek when they attacked the Israelites. And what God told the Israelites to do was to kill every man, woman, child, and livestock. If I would put it to you, an Islamist leader was quoting a similarly genocidal passage from the Quran, you would not, I would say, hesitate.
Can I respond?
We haven't, but you've had a lot.
Respond to that
I'm
point.
going to respond just quickly. Israeli officials said that Gaza will end up being a city of tents with no building standing, that they are attacking for damage, not for accuracy. The agricultural minister, Avi Dikti, he said we are rolling out a new Nakba. A Nakba is the mass expulsion, 700,000 Palestinians in 1948. This is why hundreds of genocide scholars, people who are actually, unlike you and I, experts in the field of genocide studies, fear that a genocide is taking place. So the difference between Israel and Hamas is Hamas does not have the capacity to wipe out Israel. Israel is wiping Gaza off the map. That's the point.
You've actually exposed the weakness in your argument. Israel does have the ability to kill everyone in Gaza tomorrow, and they're not doing it. In fact, well, hang on. What they're doing, and it's indisputable, they are issuing a number of warnings repeatedly to people to go south. Wait! And stay out of northern Gaza, right? And then they're pulverizing it with airstrikes, and now they've gone in on the ground and they're waging battle with Hamas fighters, terrorists, right? No, hang on. So my point is this. Israel could, if they wanted to, kill everyone in Gaza. They decided not to do that.
Now, that's a very strange definition of genocide, right? Something is only genocidal if you are using every single means you can to kill everyone. So if you're using your full cache of weapons to kill a people. So, because Israel could kill all Gazans, obviously because they control what goes in, what goes out, they are in a position to put it under siege. They do have enough weaponry to kill everyone. I mean, they're using a lot of that weaponry, right? But they're giving people warning to leave, even if sometimes that's completely implausible. They do have the power to be committing more harm in Gaza than they currently are. But again, this is about consistency. And as Owen pointed out, Piers Morgan said that Putin is committing a genocide in Ukraine because he was targeting civilians. Now, I know Piers Morgan, he'd have to have been asleep his entire life, wouldn't he? Because this has been the case for a long time. But Russia has nuclear weapons, right? If Russia wanted to kill more people in Ukraine, they could. They'd drop a nuclear bomb. Now, you could say, but they would if they could, but they can't because they'd have so much international opprobrium. Now, that's exactly the reason why Israel isn't killing everyone in Gaza. You really think that if they could do it without anyone noticing, Israel wouldn't kill all 2.2 million people in Gaza? I mean, if you listen to the language they're using, if you see how they're treating people, right? They are getting as close to the edge as they possibly can of a situation whereby the Americans couldn't possibly back them. Where the Americans would have to say, this is too much. Israel are doing as much damage as they possibly can without completely ruining the diplomatic relationships they have. So this idea that, Israel are being fairly restrained, actually, because while they have killed more civilians in this war in such a short period of time than we've seen in recent history, they could be killing more. They could be killing more. Kieran, what do you make of that defense? This can't be genocidal because Israel, if they wanted, could be killing more.
I think it's, I won't be taking the Piers Morgan definition of genocide anytime soon. I don't think any legal scholars will be either. Palestinians, such as myself, know that this is genocide. And if it's not just, it's the marriage of the rhetoric with the actions. At Srebrenica, 8,000 people were murdered, including many children. It's rightly commemorated and recognized as one of the darkest chapters in European history. As we know, almost 12,000 people have been murdered in Gaza in the past 6 weeks alone, including almost 5,000 children. So it would be telling to ask Piers Morgan whether he considers Srebrenica a genocide or an attempted genocide. Never has the definition of genocide had to meet such a threshold that those with the power might wipe out every single member of that race. And if they don't, it falls short of the definition of a genocide. It's clearly somebody who has no clue what they're talking about, trying to move the goalposts. And, you know, I mean, his point as well about it being very morally different, to use his words, to Ukraine strikes me as utterly transparent. Again, 27,000 Ukrainians have tragically died, appallingly been killed since February 2022. You don't need to be a maths genius to know that 6 weeks, 11,000 people dying in 6 weeks means that as a percentage and relative to time, very many more civilians have been killed in Gaza than were killed and have been killed in Ukraine since February 2022. The only distinguishing mark in all of this, really, if Piers Morgan were pressed, and I think Owen did a great job, could only be that, I'm sorry to say this, it's brown people dying and not Ukrainians.
Yeah, I mean, I think that is, you know, I think that could have a lot to do with it, right? I mean, also, it's just much easier as well to sort of pile in with opposition to a state when you were falling in line with Western foreign policy than if you were going against it.